You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today, broadcasting from Jerusalem. That's right, I'm back here in Israel after 3 whole weeks of crisscrossing across the United States and speaking about what's going on behind the scenes in Israel. It is so great to be back home here in Jerusalem, where I belong, with all due respect to the wonderful cities that I've been in over the last 3 weeks, which include Miami, Raleigh, Durham, Orlando, Birmingham, Tupelo, Memphis, Baltimore, Fairfax, Washington, D.C., Kansas, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, San Antonio, El Paso, Phoenix, Nashville, Palo Alto, and Carmel, California. That's right, I've been in all those cities over the last 3.5 weeks. If you think that list sounds tiring, think about all of that traveling, or most of it anyway, being early in the morning or the middle of the night in order to make those 6 a.m. flights. That means showing up at the airport 4:15, 4:30 to go through security by TSA, which on a daily basis harasses Orthodox Jews who wear tzitzit, the undergarment under their shirt, which always shows up on that radar thing that you go through when you go through security. They rightly see shirts that are bundled up and strings and everything, and looks very strange, and that means that they have to touch you all over, including in parts that people should not be touched by anyone not married to them, or, I don't know, at least seriously dating. And so that is an uncomfortable part of traveling. It is a reality in today's America. As is all the different rules that there are with each airline. Southwest Airlines is wonderful in that they let you take your bag on the plane. But you really have to remember 24 hours in advance that you have to check in for your flight. If you don't, then you are liable to go through what I went through on one of my flights. When I got on the plane, there were only 2 spots left. I had a choice between being 2 very fat people or under a Dalmatian. Yes, a real, live, large Dalmatian. Those were the only 2 seats left on the plane. I chose to be between the fat people. I myself am not such a wide person, so I thought it would be okay. But I did notice that the 2 of them did appear to be married, and that the woman appeared anyway to be very tired. And so I said to her, "Don't you want to sit next to your husband so you can use him as a pillow?" And her response to me was, "It ain't pleasant sitting next to him. You'll find out." And sure enough, moments later, he took out a huge package of pork chops covered in barbecue sauce and started eating them basically on my lap before we even taxied out of the gate. This is at 5:55 a.m., ladies and gentlemen. I took a picture with this fellow, which I'm hoping the wonderful team here at thelandofisrael.com will allow me to use as the picture. Maybe it's inappropriate, I don't know. I certainly don't have his permission. But I did indeed take a picture with this gentleman as he was eating his pork chops on my lap. Couldn't help but take that picture to show my family so they'd believe it, and perhaps the listeners here on my show. But I got my revenge a little bit. This was on Rosh Chodesh, the new month. We sing the Hallel in our prayers in the new month. And while I make a point of making sure that I pray with tefillin and talit in the main part of our prayers, and I did that in the airport and the stopover, the rest of the prayers I'm fine with doing on a plane. And so I sang that Hallel prayer. It's very melodious, very loudly, sitting next to this man. And I hit all the high notes in that Hallel. Hayarden, Hayarden. So this is what it's like to travel in America right now. Though I also want to thank another gentleman who gave me the exact opposite experience. I was flying from Kansas to Atlanta. It was a midday flight between speaking at an early lunch in Kansas and at a wonderful Yom Ha'atzmaut event at the top synagogue for Orthodox Jews in Atlanta, Beth Jacob. I was very excited that they asked me to speak at such a large synagogue on Israel's Independence Day. And I was really looking forward to speaking there. And so I got on the plane, and I asked the person near me, is there a place to plug in my phone? And he said no, but I have a machine for plugging in phones. And he let me plug in both of my phones on his machine. And I didn't know what a big deal this would be until later on. When we were about to land in Atlanta amid bad weather, and we were hovering for a while and going in circles because they weren't letting the plane land. And they said, okay, we're about to land. And then a minute later, the pilot comes on and says, we weren't allowed to land again. We are now flying to Birmingham, Alabama. And I thought, okay, I still have plenty of time. Birmingham, Alabama is a 2-hour drive to Atlanta. And I thought maybe I could get a ride. But I had checked in my bag. Complicated. And when we got there, they said, okay, we'll be flying soon. We're just refueling. But then, after they'd let the people out, a couple of them couldn't be found. And so we ended up flying a little bit later than expected. And when we were about to land in Atlanta, too late after my talk, the same gentleman says to me, when we land, immediately call them and tell them you're ready to give the speech right now from the plane on Skype. And that's what I did. I delivered the entire lecture, not on Skype, but on Google Hangouts, to 50 people who were sitting there. And imagine how many would have been there had it not been late. Sitting there in Atlanta on the screen that they happened to have there. I did the entire lecture and the questions between when we landed and when I got my bag in the airport in Atlanta on 2 different phones that had power because of this very nice man. Nico, wherever you are, thank you so much. And this shows you never know who you're going to meet when you're traveling in America. I also had the opportunity to go on a Greyhound bus. I heard Simon and Garfunkel sing about the excitement of boarding a Greyhound bus in Pittsburgh. I did not do that, but I did board a Greyhound bus in Birmingham, Alabama to go to Memphis because it seemed to be the easiest way to get there and by far the cheapest. You get to meet very different kinds of people on a Greyhound bus in the South than you would meet nowadays in most other places in America. I never really met people like them. Very nice people from different strata than the group that came to me when I gave a talk to billionaires in a Chicago skyscraper the few days later. So I got to meet the poorest people in America on this trip, and I got to meet the wealthiest people on this trip. One of the people that came to hear me speak in a small forum was Lester Crown of the Crown Fortune, whose family is worth $4 billion, and he heads that family. So to go in such a short period of time between the stopover that I had in Tupelo, Mississippi, home of Elvis, and let's just say the people I met there don't make anywhere near as much money as Elvis did, and to go from there to those billionaires in that skyscraper in such a short period of time was a little culture shock. But that is America right now. And I got to see people all over America who care very deeply about the future of the state of Israel, who love Israel and who love America, and who are conflicted right now about how to love both. Right before I left, a few incidents happened. First of all, you had the terrible incident in Poway, California. My phone started beeping uncontrollably, which is a bad sign. And I looked at my phone and I saw that it was in California. And I started getting messages from people asking me, "Are you sure you want to go to America right now? Is it safe? Are you sure going to American synagogues right now is a good idea?" Which is really shocking. These were Israelis, of course, who were asking me this. We've come a long way. I remember when it was the other way, when Americans would be asked when they were about to go to Israel, "Are you sure you want to be going to Israel right now? Is it safe?" And then the following weekend, my phone was also beeping uncontrollably. I was in Birmingham, Alabama for Shabbat. The news was coming from Israel. You had 700 rockets fall in southern Israel. 150 rockets in an hour. I don't understand how anyone can endure that. And I got to see how the solidarity goes both ways, of Americans showing solidarity with Israel after we saw Israelis showing solidarity with America. And the concern goes both ways, and the lack of understanding goes both ways. I believe that lack of understanding was illustrated very well by the Pew Research Center poll that came out shortly before my trip to the United States. Now, every year, seemingly right before my spring speaking tour, is when Pew Research takes its poll about what Americans think about Israelis. And this poll tends to be very helpful to my speaking tours because they have very exciting, happy news. The people of America like the people of Israel, and this year it was no different. 64% of Americans have a favorable view of the people of Israel. Only 28% have a negative point of view. Yay! But, I know you're waiting for the but, this year they asked a follow-up question. The follow-up question is, what do you think about the Israeli government? And there the numbers were very different. Only 39% have a favorable point of view of the Israeli government. 41 maybe. And 51 have a negative point of view. That's right, more than half of Americans have a negative point of view of the government the people of Israel chose on April 9th. Now, perhaps some of that has to do with the policies of the government of Israel. Netanyahu may be aligning himself too blatantly with the Trump administration that about half of the Americans don't like for whatever reasons. Perhaps it has to do with other policies of the Israeli government as well. I don't know. And perhaps some of it has to do with the Israeli government not really explaining itself very well. As someone who speaks about Israeli democracy around the world, I think that this poll really reinforced the tremendous responsibility I have, because Israel's democracy should be one of its top assets in explaining the country to the world, not a liability in any way. Perhaps some of it has to do with an impression among the people of the United States that Israel is moving far to the right. Now, there's nothing wrong with moving to the right, especially if you've had rockets fall all over the country. When you've had rockets that fell only in the Gaza periphery, maybe people didn't realize how serious a problem it was. But now you have rockets that can fall everywhere. And you can understand perhaps there was more hope for peace being around the corner in the mid-1990s, and the children raised in that era felt that hope, whereas the people born more recently don't remember that. We've had rockets and mortars fly, incendiary balloons and kites, and so those people can't expect that the next thing that's going to be flying over the border from Gaza will be a white dove. And so I can understand why Israelis would move to the right. And yet the polls don't prove that. If anything, the election in Israel showed that Israelis aren't moving to the right. If you count all the votes for all the right-wing parties, including the parties that didn't cross the electoral threshold of 3.25%, about 150,000 votes, there were fewer right-wing votes than there were in the election 4 years ago. If you count mandates in the Knesset, the right-center bloc went down from 67 seats to 65. The center-left bloc went up from 53 to 55. And the difference between the blocs would have been even closer if it weren't for the Arabs deciding not to vote as much in this election. There were 13 seats for Arab parties in the previous Knesset. There are 10 for this time. And the Arabs voted less, not because of anything the Israeli government did, but because their Arab representatives did not serve them very well, did not get what they need to get for their constituency. And the ultra-Orthodox voted more. They went from 13 seats that they had, just like the Arabs last time, this time to 16, in part because they were concerned that one of the candidates for prime minister was Yair Lapid, who rightly or wrongly is seen as secularist. So that's a swing of 6 seats in the Knesset right there that has nothing to do with the traditional left and right-wing divide and has nothing to do with Netanyahu. Now, it is true, though, that a lot of this election was a referendum on the policies of Netanyahu. And the people of Israel decided that they don't mind the policies of Netanyahu, that they like it, that our economy is doing relatively well. We have high economic growth, low unemployment, record year in tourism and everything, that our high tech is booming, that we even sort of landed a plane on the moon. I mean, we got to the moon very, very fast, but we got there. Became the 4th country to make it to the moon after the United States and Russia and China. So what if we ended up with a crash landing with a pile of junk on the moon? But it's our junk, and it's got an Israeli flag in that junk. And the security situation for Israel could be doing a lot worse, despite the rockets and everything from Gaza. All the groups fighting each other in Syria could have united against a common enemy, and it didn't happen. And the diplomatic situation for Israel could be a lot worse. They told us for 25 years that the world will be boycotting and shunning us if we don't have a peace process. And we don't have a peace process yet. We could have one very soon. But Netanyahu has been welcomed all around the world over the last 4 years without there being a peace process. So I can understand people in America not liking the policies of Israel, while the people of Israel do like those policies. And I can understand that there are also people in Israel who don't like particularly what's going on in America, and that this increases the divide that there is between Israelis and Americans right now, and makes there be results like there are in that poll. Is that really a sign of a problem? There was an article in the Jerusalem Post a couple weeks ago by Martin Olerner of the Religious Zionists of America called On the Blessings of Bifurcation. If you look up bifurcation in your average dictionary, it'll tell you it means dividing into 2 branches. So Mr. Olerner writes about how, yes, the people of Israel and the people of America are going in different directions right now. Israelis are moving more to the right. Non-Orthodox American Jews are moving more to the left. And he says that's not a problem. Everyone has the right to choose whoever they want when they vote. It's only natural that people living in different places with different concerns will move in different directions. This bifurcation is healthy, not problematic. The problems begin when Jews on one side of the Atlantic try to dictate to Jews on the other side what to think, how to feel, and who to cast their ballots for. They have a right to worry about each other. After all, that's what Jews do. As the Talmud states, Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh. All Jews have a responsibility for one another. But neither side should try to take the upper hand over the other. Instead, both sides should embrace the other in their arms, despite their many differences. Now, I'm not sure I agree with every bit of this article, but it definitely makes an interesting point that people have a right to go in different directions, and that isn't necessarily a problem. There needs to be an understanding, though, that the people are going in different directions. So, for instance, Israelis don't understand what American Jews, a lot of them anyway, are dealing with in America right now with Donald Trump. There's a feeling that among Americans that Israelis can't possibly get it. That just like American Jews came to Israel when you had cafes and buses blowing up and the people of Israel told them, you're not going to understand no matter what because you don't live here. I've seen Americans tell Israelis the same thing. You're not going to understand what we go through. And that's okay. It just needs to be accepted that the people of Israel aren't going to understand what a lot of Americans are going through. And it needs to be understood the other way. And that Americans are not going to understand from not living in Israel why they have adopted their political views that they have. And so one group is on one side, one group is on the other. One is becoming more right-wing, and one group is becoming more left-wing, and that's okay. We remain one happy family. And so I experienced a lot of love there in America, of American Jews loving and caring about the people of Israel. And now I'm back in Israel, where they love and care about the Jews in America. Let's keep that love continuing to flow despite the differences that there are. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure here, broadcasting again from Jerusalem. And next week, we'll be back in the saddle interviewing people again, now that the Knesset and me are working at the same time. So stay tuned to more fun here in the weeks ahead on Inside Israel Today. Hello, I'm Gil Hoffman, host of Inside Israel Today, and I'm honored to be taking part in the Shavuot of a Lifetime at the Mount Zion Hotel. Come join yours truly and other show hosts here, such as Ari Abramowitz, Jeremy Gimpel, Eve Harrow, Yishai Fleischer, talking about Torah and inspiration. What will I be talking about? You'll just have to come out to the Mount Zion Hotel.
Shavuot of a Lifetime, Thursday through Monday, June 6th through 10th, 2019. For more information, visit thelandofisrael.travel. That's thelandofisrael.travel.